brought the good gavel. Okay. The Cuyahoga County Finance and Budgeting Committee meeting for Monday, April 1st, 2024 will please come to order, and the clerk will call the roll.
And just as a reminder to all who are in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Calling the roll, Mr. Miller.
Here.
Ms. Turner.
Present.
Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones is absent at the moment. Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Schrein. Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Byrne.
Here.
There is a quorum.
Thank you very much. And next item on the agenda is public comment. Do we have anybody signed in?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
Thank you very much. And regarding the minutes from the March 4th, 2024 meeting, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from March 4th, 2024 as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. There are no legislative matters referred to the committee. We have one item for discussion, which is our update on the Enterprise Resource Planning Project, where we hope to get an understanding of recent activities and accomplishments, and also what plans and decisions are coming down the road. And I'm going to call forth Director Andy Johnson to make the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Miller. First of all, my name's Andy Johnson, Chief Information Officer for Cuyahoga County. I want to start off by saying thank you. I know everybody's busy. On behalf of my team, I appreciate this opportunity to discuss our enterprise resource planning team and what we've got planned for the future. Thanks, Janine. So I thought it might be worthwhile to start off very briefly to recalibrate on when we talk about ERP, what is ERP and how do we use it here at the county? First thing I'd like to mention is that our ERP software is Infor, so you may hear us talk about Infor. That is, those two words, as far as the county goes, can be basically replaced with each other. Infor means our ERP. And so for our ERP and how we use that at Cuyahoga County, first and foremost is it is the payroll system that pays about 7,000 or over 7,000 of Cuyahoga County employees. So that fact is never lost on us. When we think about ERP, we think primarily of paying the employees of Cuyahoga County. Second, though, is it also serves as our system that records folks' time. So when people fill out timesheets, about 5,000, a little over 5,000 of them use what's called WFM, Workforce Management. So those two elements of our ERP we view as the primary function of our software. But there are many other things that ERP does. I'm going to quickly go through just a handful just to give you a sense of what the package does for us. It manages our purchasing. We call it purchasing. We call that procurement. Anything that the county buys goes through this ERP and is managed via that. It pays our vendors through our accounts payable. It records our financial transactions through our general ledger. It manages the county contracts. It manages the county assets through a module called Enterprise Asset Management. I'll come back to that in just a second. And it manages county employees, their employee records through our Global Human Resource module. I did want to mention that on the Enterprise Asset Management, you might recall in 2022, that component of our ERP was sold by Infor to a company called Hexagon. So while it functionally hasn't meant anything to us, it does administratively add another layer of concern, another layer of management. So when we talk about Infor for this presentation, I mean Infor and a smaller piece called Hexagon. So I'll pause there. Any questions on ERP, what it is, and how the county is using it?
Any questions so far? Okay, thank you.
All right. So, as you know, we went through a very rigorous ERP implementation. We concluded that a couple of years ago. Question might be, what are we doing now? And so First question may be, well, why are we still working on ERP? And I would come back and say to all of you that we never stop working on ERP, nor do we ever stop working on any of our packages. There is always opportunity for improvement. There are changes in business. There are changes in functionality from the vendor. There may be things that we never implemented. There may be things that we implemented not very well. All of those items, whether it be ERP or any package, we are constantly reevaluating, and we are looking for opportunities to make it better. And in specific to ERP, oh, thanks for forwarding, by the way. Specific to ERP, oh, actually that was me that didn't forward, sorry about that. What we've developed is an ERP management feedback loop. And what this is the ability for the county to keep looking forward, but making sure that we're on track. A common question I might get is, well, what modules of Infor have been implemented? Or what is on the horizon to implement? And I would say that that may not be the exact right question. What we need to look at is, what is the priority of the business? What does management sit there in the functions and look at and say, this is a priority for us? And those are the items that we work on. So we'll take a look from a management level. Our managers from IT will be talking to the managers in the functional areas, understanding what their biggest pain points are, and starting to address those. And we have ourselves on a cadence, a weekly cadence of reviewing that with the managers of the different areas. And you can see on my chart here that in the first week we're talking to the workforce management leadership, HR leadership, the purchasing leadership. And we're understanding what it is that at a management level are their pain points, and we're working on those. And we have that cadence through the week 1, week 2, week 3. Culminates in week 4, where then there's a chief meeting, and we'll have a meeting between myself and the chiefs of the other departments to understand, hey, this is what the teams have set as priority, this is what we've accomplished, these are our roadblocks, and this is what we see moving ahead. That readout happens roughly every 4 weeks. I'll pause there again. Any questions on that?
So, can you give us an example of anything new that has come out of this process during the last 6 months?
I think one of the things that we are, a couple things that are coming to mind that we're working on. The first is, I'll take from the finance side, ACH payments. So ACH payments are something that could have been implemented, wasn't. It's something that we've revisited. The finance team has come back and said, hey, this is a priority for us to be able to do ACH payments on a mass scale. And so that's something that we're working on. We're working on implementing that. We're working on, we have a third-party vendor that actually does the encryption of that. And we're working with that team to get that done, as well as with the finance team.
So, could you say a little bit about what ACH payments are and where they would be used in the county?
Yeah, sorry, my apologies on that, Chairman. ACH payments are basically electronic payments. It replaces the old way of cutting a check. So the old days, we would write, I don't know how many checks per AP cycle, write all these checks, sign the checks, mail them out. Now it's what's known as an ACH payment. Those are all electronically transmitted.
Do we still do any paper checks, or is it all on ACH?
Great question. We still do paper checks, and we're working to reduce that number. We have some technical encryption that we're waiting on right now, but we are working to get that number down.
Councilman Sean.
Are we looking to replace the ACH with credit cards at all? So we have a company credit card per se?
Yeah, I haven't looked at that specifically, but I think that's something that we can look at. In a previous life, we did do that program where we were looking at a credit card and getting a rebate on that credit card.
Right, because it can generate 2 or 3% to us for doing nothing other than that. And a lot of the vendors will actually take that as an alternative, thinking it's a faster payment to them, so everybody wins out of the deal, and the ACH then gets pushed into the background. I know we moved considerably farther ahead from going from paper to ACH, but the next step is to issue a credit card from the county itself to the major people who do procurement, and a lot of these people will negotiate discounts for us on that too.
That's right. And in my previous life, some of the bigger ticket items actually were the more successful items.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think that's a great opportunity to either cut costs or actually generate some revenue if you want.
Well, I think you do both. I think you'll find that you could probably pick up 50, 60% of our vendors will take that credit card.
Fantastic. Yep, I think it's a great suggestion.
Anything else? Okay, please continue.
All right. So when we think about Infor, Infor, I know there's a conception it's just one big product. However, Infor really is made up of several smaller pieces in this product. So think of a puzzle, right? And each module is a piece of that puzzle. And what I've listed here are the bigger modules that we have, or the bigger puzzle pieces. So we have workforce management. We talked about that a little while ago. We have Lawson. And I'm going to come back to this one. But Lawson is, in general, our core finance function. So I know it seems weird, I'm talking about Infor, but inside of Infor, there's a piece called Lawson. We'll come back to that in just a second. And items like Landmark, which is our human resources piece, Mingo, which is our operating system, and on and on. You can see these various modules that we have that make up our package we call Infor. Now, in most cases, we are in great shape. We are on the latest version of that puzzle piece. There's no upgrade required on those. We implemented those, or over the course of the last couple years, we've upgraded to be on the latest version. However, there's one significant piece, and we talked about this during the ERP implementation. There's one significant piece, this Lawson, where we are not on the current version. And I recall conversations with you during ERP that we'd have to revisit this, and now's the time to revisit this. This is a significant upgrade. We're going from version 10 to version 11. And the other thing to note on here is that support for this version of Lawson ends in 2030. Now, 2030 sounds like a long time off, but I believe that we need to talk about this now. And in the next few slides, I'll be talking a little bit about what I'm thinking when it comes to 2030 and when it comes to Lawson. A lot there. I know there's a lot of components there. I know it can get confusing, so please, if you have any questions, I'd like to answer those.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, a couple dates to keep in mind. Our current Infor contract expires in December of 2026. So it's hard to believe that it's been a decade already. This thing was signed, what's that make it, 8 years ago. We're coming up on the point to renegotiate this contract. This contract covers everything, and it runs about $1.65 million a year. This is for maintenance. And if you remember, our Infor portfolio is a cloud solution. So in that 1.6, it covers all the hardware, all the connectivity. So just keep that in mind as we walk through here. This is a licensing agreement with Infor that expires in December of 26. But as I mentioned on the previous slide, the expiration of the Infor Lawson piece is in 2030. And that's version 10. When I say expiration, Infor has not indicated, they have flat out told us that they will stop support in 2030. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means when we don't have support on something, we don't get updates, we don't get the latest, greatest, we don't get fixes, we don't get any of those things that your normal maintenance would cover. Now, Infor has also said, well, hey, yeah, we will maintain that version, but it'll come at a cost. And we have not negotiated that cost yet. I'm hopeful that we never need it, but we anticipate a 50% to 100% increase in the maintenance if we don't upgrade. big numbers there, and that's and I will be coming back to you at the time where we're actually formally proposing this to give you the details on what that exactly means. But I wanted to give you a taste of why this 2030 date is of concern and why we need to react to this. But the other thing that I want to mention is in our current version of Lawson, we are starting to see that we're missing out on advancements. Of course, if you're in for, you're not going to invest in an older package, which is what we're on. They're going to invest in a newer package. And when I talk about investment, there are some crucial things that I think we as a county need to look at. And the first and foremost comes to mind is our compliance with ADA. That is becoming a wave in the software industry. It's becoming a wave internally. Our current Infor version 10 is a COBOL-based antiquated version. It can't even begin to comprehend or begin to address the needs of internal staff with addressing the ADA issues. When we start talking about a version 11, now we start to be able to talk about where those advancements are coming to accommodate folks with ADA.
So, Director,
I will pause there.
how long has version 11 existed?
How long is,
Yes.
when you say how long, like how?
When did Infor come out with version 11?
Oh, great question. And I should have known that. I would say around 2019. I'm going off of memory here. Maybe 2018, somewhere in that ballpark. I recall remembering it was like 2 or 3 years after we had signed the initial agreement.
So, have they said anything about when version 12 is going to come out?
What's interesting about that question is once we go to version 11, major upgrades will no longer happen. So for instance, all those other modules that I listed off, for the near future or even the distant future, we will not have to take another upgrade. Part of the advantage of these later products is that the upgrades come in regular, repetitive bites. And so what that means from our standpoint is that we now consume these advancements, we consume these fixes, we consume these changes to the software in smaller but repetitive bites. So when you ask the question, hey, what's the next upgrade after version 11? I will tell you that there will be no major upgrade after version 11. There will be continual updates that we'll have to react to, but no major upgrade. Similar to the other elements that I mentioned before.
Okay. Questions? Councilman Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These continuous upgrades you're talking about, you have to pay for each one of those?
No, great question. So I mentioned the $1.6 million of maintenance. That covers those continuous upgrades. So even us going from V10 to V11, there's no licensing costs. We'll get to that in just a second. That is all covered by our licensing arrangements. So the fixes, the enhancements, the new functionality, all covered by that maintenance agreement.
For how long?
As long as we have the maintenance agreement in place. So the current one that expires in 2026, we'll be working on negotiating a new contract over the course of the year to cover us beyond 2026.
Do you anticipate that to be through the chair, do you anticipate that to be a long-term thing, or?
Good question. And so that's something you always contemplate. How long do you want to, arrange with this, arrange with a particular vendor? The original agreement was a 10-year agreement, and I foresee that being a reasonable agreement this time. There will always be a way to exit that contract. In other words, we'll have language in there that will say we can exit after 36, 100 days notice. I'm not sure what the exact number will ultimately be, but we'll be able to exit that contract.
One more question, if I could, Mr. Chairman. So in 2022, Infor sold to Hexagon. Is that going to change anything?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so right now, the functionality of the software and the way that Hexagon operates hasn't significantly changed, but we do think it's an opportunity to talk with our team that is actually using that enterprise asset management and see if maybe we should look at something else. Maybe we should look at the package that Infor now has adopted as their asset management. So there might be an opportunity there to do something different rather than stick with Hexagon. Not saying that we're leaving Hexagon, but definitely something we would look at.
Thank you.
If we did an upgrade to version 11, what would be the estimated implementation time and what would be the expected cost?
So thank you, Chairman Miller. That will lead me right into my next slide.
Okay, great.
Bear with me, I'll get to your question here. I would like to explain, though, that as we look to do this upgrade, this is something that takes thought, it takes measured approach, and it takes a way that all voices are heard in this process. And I'd like to walk you through how we're going to get there. But Chairman Miller, to answer your question, we believe it'll be a 3-year, $6 million project. That's a complete back of the envelope guess on our part, but I'll explain how we'll hone that number in when it comes time for budgeting for the 26-27 cycle. In 2024, we are going to really focus on the development of the RFP. And we believe we'll have that RFP, and this RFP is for the implementation of version 11. It's not for licensing, it's not for really anything else other than implementing version 11. We are going to work into that pain points that we have right now with our current version and how those are addressed. I want to work in any efficiencies that we can gain by going to version 11, but primarily, this RFP we're talking about is implementation of version 11. And we're talking about Lawson, which is primarily the financial pieces, the payroll, the general ledger, accounts payable, that type of function. So 2024, by July, we anticipate having the RFP completed and released. Then July through September, we will be receiving the responses to those RFPs from the vendors. When we hit September, October, we'll start scoring those RFPs. And then October, December, we'll primarily focus on how we are on the vendor that we'd like to lead through this implementation exercise.
Is Infor itself a possible vendor?
Infor has a division called Infor Consulting Services, I believe, something along. There's most of these, just like Oracle has Oracle and Oracle Consulting, Infor has Infor, the software producer, manufacturer, developer, and they also have Infor Consulting Services. We anticipate that Infor Consulting Services will respond to this RFP.
And in a good case scenario, how many bids would you get?
If we got half a dozen, if we had 6 bids, I'd be happy with that. Continuing on, then in 2025, we look at 2025, what we anticipate is spending about half the year working with that vendor on developing a statement of work. Now, the county, I don't think this will be a surprise to anybody, but the county has not done a great job of having contracts that work in their favor. We have been working with law in some other regards, and I fully anticipate working with law in the development of this agreement on the statement of work. Not to give necessarily the county an advantage, but to at least level the playing field between the county and the vendor. You might say 6 months seems like a long time. I think we have to allow some time for that negotiation to happen, that back and forth, but also if our chosen vendor refuses, won't meet some of our sort of bare bones demands, I think we need time then to work with the second place vendor to bring in another opportunity, another responder to the RFP. We've heard multiple times from the prosecutor's office, which is our civil representation, that when we narrow in on one vendor, now we've given ourselves no negotiation ability. The vendor knows that they win and that they can take a very hard stance with us. We're going to approach it that we'll have a vendor in the wings so that there is that pressure and that we have an alternative. So we're not sitting there wholly dependent on that particular vendor. So that's why the 6 months in 2025 to negotiate this as a statement of work. After that, we look at September and October, and we prepare our budget for the 26-27 year. And that's at that point is where we'll make that formal proposal. We'll know specifically what the costs are. We'll know what the internal commitment is. And at that time, we will present that as part of the budget process as a non-operating expense ask. And then January 2026, we kick off the project. And as I mentioned, right now, back of the envelope, we're saying 3 years, $6 million. My hope is that it comes in significantly less than that, but that right now is what I'm putting out there as a target.
And am I correct that the 3 years doesn't include the preliminaries in 2024 and 2025, so you're looking at sometime in 2028 for completion?
2028, 2020, yeah, so you do 26, 27, 28, yep. And you know, I could, if I was sitting in your shoes, I might say, well, hey, why are we starting 2 years early? One of the compelling factors for starting now, besides the fact that we can start taking advantage of those advancements, we can start taking advantage of compliance with ADA, not saying it'll be 100% compliant, but it'll start taking steps towards ADA compliance, is resources start to become an issue. As we look and as others are trying to get off of version 10, we start hitting that deadline, there is going to be an increase in demand on those resources. We'd like to be ahead of the game. We'd like to be in a little bit more of a positive position getting those resources from the consulting firms on our behalf, rather than trying to compete with many other clients of Inforce trying to get off of version 10.
During that 3-year implementation, how much disruption will there be to day-to-day operations?
Well, our hope is none, but we all know that that's not the case. So I think with one of the commitments or one of the asks of the vendors is to give a commitment on internal county resources. So I don't think we had that prior, and we walked in without an expectation of what is the commitment from the county to implement this. And that's one of the things that we're going to be very strong on is, hey, we need part of this is going to be accounts payable. How much do we anticipate over the course of this implementation? Do we need county support from accounts payable? We take a look then at, okay, we need X amount of support. Can we afford that in the course of our normal operations, or do we need to go out and do some backfill on that? And those are the types of questions that I hope to be able to answer when we present for our formal ask on the budget.
Are we going to have a better project management system in place than we have in the past?
Well, that's certainly the hope. I think part of this is, do we have a strong statement of work from the vendor? Do we have a commitment from our team? Do we have a commitment from the county? And if we're in agreement on that, if we have milestone-based projects, then I think we have a shot at doing a little bit of a better job.
Questions by my colleagues? Continue.
All right.
So, Director, I presume the way you're presenting this, we've made a decision that we're sticking with Infor, that we're not giving thought to a totally new system. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. I know that we had talked, maybe it was about this time last year, and with the new administration coming in, we did do an RFI on other packages. We had other vendors present and did an evaluation on that. In fact, recently we did another reevaluation on that. The conclusion is that we will stick with Infor. I think I invoked Councilman Gallagher's name, that if we needed to switch vendors, we better have a pretty strong business case to do so. And that right now, we couldn't develop that business case.
That's a relief.
All right. All right. Chairman Miller, sorry.
As an aside, Infor is still, I think, number 3 or 4 in the world, is it not?
That is correct.
So it's not, we're not swimming with the fish here. It's not number 3 or 4 position, I think, isn't it?
That is correct. Actually, I just read an article from Panorama Consulting. It's a group that I have followed, not a big 8 firm, but a smaller firm that I think can be a little more practical. And Panorama had Infor listed as a top 10 governmental ERP. It had, later on, it had them as a top 3 for large entities, which I would consider ourselves a large entity. I think they cut it off at $250 million, and we're, certainly well above that. So SAP, Oracle, Infor tend to be the big 3. Now, that's not to say that Infor is perfect. They are absolutely not. And we recognize that there are problems with Infor. We'll uncover more problems with Infor. And so there will be, we know of problems, and there will be problems with Infor where it won't meet our business needs. We have to work around those, and that's what we have a team to do.
And will be higher, there's a higher likelihood if you're in the top 3 that you're going to get on your RFP 5 or 6 potential bidders who are going to want to do the implementation for you.
I think so. Whether that be one of the big 8, well, I call them big 8, shows you how old I am, but one of the major accounting firms, one of the major consulting firms, or some of the more of the niche players, I think we'll get it. And I think just with personal contacts in those areas, we'll get, I would say, 6 to respond. So, Mr. Miller, you had asked about the RFP development and the project after that. I think that it starts with a good foundation. And part of our governance on developing this RFP, and the purpose of this governance is to make sure that all voices are heard in this RFP process. I think we've made the mistake previously of where sometimes things become an IT project, and IT tends to do things differently. In what we want to avoid in this RFP process is that we don't hear voices of the rest of the team, and the rest of the team being our finance team as well as our HR team, but primarily finance is what we're talking about here. And so we have governance meetings set up where we have a management conference that's the managers in the particular areas that meet on a periodic basis to study the RFP, to make sure that their voices are heard, make sure that those pain points are covered, that the items that we need in this implementation are covered. Then we also have then the, what I'll call the subject matter experts or the business process owners, those that are very intimate with accounts payable, accounts receivable, purchasing. We have a second series of meetings set up in sessions to make sure that their voices are heard in the creation of this RFP, and I think it starts with that, and it starts then with the SOW that covers those items.
So any kind of input in particular that you would be looking for from the council regarding the RFP development? I hadn't thought of that question, Mr. Miller, so I'm going to reserve the right. Right now, nothing strikes me, but I think as we start to get the responses in, understanding what the economics of it are starting to look like, what maybe we're grossly wrong or maybe we're grossly correct, I think keeping you advised along the way of what that looks like, what the timing might look like, that would be something that I would seek your counsel on. What's your best guess on the RFP issue date, and once it's issued, how long would it be open for response?
So we anticipate that RFP will be completed by July of this year. I think I'm going to refer back to my notes. Yeah, we covered that on the chart on page, slide 6. We anticipate by July that we'll be completed with that. Beginning of July, we'll be completed with that. And then 2 months that we'll leave the RFP out there.
It would be issued about the 1st of July and responses due about the 1st of September.
Yep. And we may, depending on how things work, there's nothing that's compelling us to hit a certain specific date. We want to have a target date out there, but if we're not ready, we've got time where we'll make sure we get it right.
Other questions? Okay.
I've only got one more concept, and I will fully admit that this is going to be, this will be complicated, and I apologize. And I know, one of my jobs is to take complicated and make it simple, and I will admit this one's going to be a little challenging. So, Mr. Chairman, you're aware that when I first got here, I don't favor big, huge projects. I favor breaking those down into pieces. And so when we look at this upgrade, even though it is only for the finance team, or primarily the finance team, there is an opportunity to break it into a smaller piece. And one of those pieces is going to what we call a multi-tenant. And I apologize for that term, but there's no really other way to say it. Right now, we have a few modules that are on a single tenant. And so I'll take a moment to describe what that is. I mentioned that we're in the cloud, so we're on someone else's server, right? They manage it. We're on Infor's server, and they manage that server for us. And since we're a single tenant on a handful of our modules, we are the only company, if you will, the only entity that's on those single tenant servers, all right? A multi-tenant server is a server where many customers are on that server with that version of the software. So think about Amazon. We all use Amazon. I'm a customer, you're a customer, well, maybe potentially a customer of Amazon. But Amazon only has one version of their software running. We all use it. We're all different customers. We all use that same version of the software. I'm going to go back to Infor single tenant. We sign on to Infor in a couple of our modules. We're the only tenant there. To go to version 11, we need to go to a multi-tenant environment. So I'll pause there. Any questions on that?
Yes. What about the modules?
Excuse me.
Where we're already at the latest version. Does this concept of single versus multi-tenant affect those, or does it only affect the Lawson area?
It does affect those. And the unfortunate news is that as software vendors drive towards a multi-tenancy model, that's where they want to be. If you think about from a software provider's viewpoint, they have one version of the software to maintain. So we have one version of the software to maintain. As we start to look at where we have the single tenant, they have multiple versions of that software to maintain. And so what we're seeing is that even though we're on the latest version, it's a different version than their mainstream version. And I'll go back to ADA compliance. We had an opportunity where we were hoping for ADA compliance on our job portal site. And we were given assurance, yep, when you take this next batch of upgrades, you will get that. Unfortunately, that next batch of upgrades only applied to their multi-tenant environment.
So if you go back to slide 4.
Yes.
Which of these modules are multi-tenant, if any, and which are single tenant?
So I will tell you that the single tenants that we have are the Lawson that we've been talking about, the Landmark that is on the latest version but a single tenant, Human Resource Delivery, Cash Treasury Management, and Strategic Sourcing are all single tenant.
The rest are
The rest are multi.
Okay. Okay, that
So,
helps.
The whole point of my slide on this, and we have a ways to go. The idea is that this may be a piece of the project that we can break out and we can do now. Rather than wait for a bigger project, we may be able to move to multi-tenancy now. That would be we have some homework to do, and I'm just presenting this to you as a potential. We have some homework to do. We have to understand how that impacts our users, how that impacts the environment. We're not there yet. But I had this opportunity. I wanted you to be aware that this may be something that we may be able to fund through our normal operations. We'll have to work on funding where that comes from, but you may hear about this during a BOC meeting or maybe at an upcoming council meeting, but I wanted this concept to be out there.
Would migration to multi-tenant involve outside consultant assistance or something that we could do on our own in consultation with Infor?
That's a very good question. We looked at doing it ourselves. It is it's pretty technical upgrade, and so we would need not your traditional functional, but we would need additional technical upgrade. This would be something in this case that Infor Services could do for us, but since it's being a technical upgrade, we wouldn't see much impact on the users. We don't believe. We still have homework to do, but that's what our initial thought is. And I apologize if I brought you something that's kind of unbaked, but I wanted you to at least hear this.
Unbaked is okay. It's good to get some understanding of what's coming down the road. So what would be the likely implementation timing on this? Would it be prior to the loss and upgrade?
Oh, for sure. That would be something that we've heard just in our conversations with Infor. It could be done in 8 weeks. Again, we have some vetting to do on that.
Questions by my colleagues? Okay.
So that is, I hope I answered your question, Chairman Miller, on where we're at and where we're going with ERP. But that concludes my prepared.
So when we finish the major portion of the implementation, when we got payroll and WFM up and running, there were a number of other modules that we were talking about still needing to be implemented and talking about getting non-executive agencies using more of it and stuff like that. And my question is, how much of what was envisioned at that time has since been accomplished? What has been accomplished and what has not yet been accomplished?
So I'll take the last part first, and that deals with getting other non-executive agencies onto Infor. I think the primary area that we look for that opportunity is the WFM piece. Understand that many of these non-executives use our accounts payable, they use our vendor management, but there are other opportunities, workforce management being one of those. I mentioned we have 7,000 employees we're paying and only 5,000 using workforce management. Right now we're getting started with, I believe it's one of the courts, and now I'm drawing a blank on which court it is, getting started having them use workforce management. We've also been in discussions with juvenile court and have got them starting their design on using workforce management and further leveraging the GHR module. So we are making progress on that. It is a it's an opportunity, and that opportunity will be there, and we'll continue to be fleshing out these other organizations that can use it. As far as some of those modules that were purposefully pushed off during the implementation, I will say that implementation has different meaning to different people, right? So we could implement a module, and the module's implemented, but there could be a whole host of functionality that's not implemented. And then there also could be different priorities. So I don't have a specific number for you, Chairman, on what modules are in or what's out, but I refer back to our management operating structure, where we talk to the managers, the subject matter experts, and the chiefs as to what is the priority. And we take a look at that. So there may be a module that we have out there that we didn't implement, and it just sinks to the bottom of the implementation priority list, and it may just stay there. We may have higher priorities that come across. we are looking at, we call that the backlog. We are looking at bringing in additional resources to help us in that backlog to kind of bring that down, maybe get to some of those things that were never implemented. So to answer the question, what hasn't been implemented, I would say the desire has probably changed, and we're looking at different priorities. There may be something that implemented that we need to look at. We didn't implement it very well. We need to re-implement it. I said that sounds like we need to change the way the implementation looks. So I know it sounds like I'm being evasive on your question, but if there was, say, a module that we push down the road, if we just say, hey, we're not going to use that module, I can't get any licensing feedback on that. We're still going to be at the same run rate of payment on our maintenance fees that we are right now. So I really focus on the priorities of what the function is asking for.
So, could you prepare and send us a spreadsheet that would kind of list all the things that were talked about at the time we finished the basic implementation? And then for each one say, this one was implemented, this one hasn't been implemented, but we're still interested in it. This one, it hasn't been implemented, and on further consideration, we don't think we need it. And so we just go through each of them and kind of tell what the status of it is.
Okay, happy to do that. What would be, may I ask what the purpose of that would be?
Just to have an understanding of where we are and where we aren't.
Okay.
Nothing more than that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the council for your attention. Thank you.
Any miscellaneous business, anybody? Nothing holding our attention further. We are adjourned. Thank you.